summer of Batman. The surprise hit grossed so much more than expected. It cost $48 million and made over $400 million. So humans do what humans do, and the studios decided to dig into what other similar properties they might be able to adapt to the silver screen. Now, the first of these was Dick Tracy. Based on the Charles Gould newspaper strip, directed and starring Warren Beatty, Dick Tracy melded incredible visual effects and a colorful palette with a very stylized aesthetic. Childish prosthetics and hard-boiled crime cliches, trying to appeal to the older fans and children simultaneously, and with mixed responses from viewers. While it's undeniable the talent on screen that includes Al Pacino and Madonna and Dustin Hoffman among many others, it also requires you to not take it all that seriously. I think if you love the comic and weird, quirky, idiosyncratic movies, then you're likely to get some enjoyment out of it. But at the time, your average moviegoer who enjoyed the edgy darkness of Batman might not have wanted to go see a dick in a banana yellow coat and hat. I think this movie plays better now some 36 years later than it did in 1990. I don't normally do this, but for some reason I decided to do this video anyway. Okay, so normally I would pick a topic, make some notes of the ideas for the video, mostly a list of the movies that I want to cover, and as I research further and I add to the list, maybe tighten down on the concept to make the amount of movies possible for me to cover in one video, right? The trajectory of the films begins to dictate like a story that I can tell, some kind of narrative or something, or maybe I notice that the creators behind the productions that give me a narrative to follow, and often there are movies that have to be cut out because they no longer fit the criteria of the video that I'm making. As an example, I made a Killer Crocodile video, and at some point I had to decide to cut out any mutants or genetically enhanced crocs because they all suck. But really, because there was just too many films at that point to cover them all. So what's my point? Well, I've been wanting to make this microgenre video since the start of my channel, and then I never do. I talk myself out of it. So in this video, yes, I'm going to cover the 90s pulp nostalgia pictures that I promised in the thumbnail, but also I'm going to show you why this video keeps falling apart, and even now I know that it doesn't really work. I'm just gonna share my process of how I worked through this all, but it's gonna get really mucky really fast. Now, you might think that The Rocketeer is the next on our 90s Hollywood pulp movies, but this is where it gets complicated. I think Dick Tracy gets forgotten when people talk about the 90s pulp movies. Mostly people like to talk about three movies: The Rocketeer in 93, The Shadow in 94, and The Phantom in 96. And it makes sense, right? All three share a 1930s aesthetic, and unlike Dick Tracy, these all had some kind of magic or sci-fi tech. I mean, I guess Tracy's two-way wristwatch was sci-fi at the time, but these other examples are still largely beyond our reach. The Rocketeer has this jetpack, the Shadow has the ability to cloud men's minds, and the Phantom, well, you know, he had like magical skulls, and he talked to his dead father, and he kept a wolf as a pet. I don't know, but they fit together like a trilogy, right? The Batman and Dick Tracy and The Rocketeer are based on comics, and The Phantom is based on a comic, and The Shadow was based on a radio show and subsequently a comic, and both The Shadow and The Phantom were in pulp novels in the 30s and the 40s. But see, technically The Rocketeer isn't based on a legit pulp. It's a 90s comic based on the pulps, but it's an homage. It's not authentic to the time. So like, does that count? So I'm gonna say yes. Now, The Phantom is the most mind-boggling endeavor of them all. It's campy, it's goofy, the purple smiley hero that lives in a skull cave but looks like a cereal mascot. It's a fun, rich 90s Hollywood adventure film which has its charms, and even more so now that it's a relic of nostalgia. But you can't overlook some stuff, like the most contrived murder weapon, the old microscope that you for some inexplicable reason retooled to stab people in the eyes. But it also works. Like, I don't know.
Well, I guess you won't be needing these anymore.
Okay. Or how he shows up for battle riding a horse with a wolf at his side, only to leave on a plane and have his horse and wolf run along after it. And it's a good thing that they do, and that they are as fast as a flying plane, because they need to jump off the plane and onto a very fast and very tired horse. And then, of course, we can't forget the time that they rode their horse into a cave only to somehow get to another cave. What? So despite the lush 90s Hollywood production, I think it was too campy for audiences at the time, in the same exact way audiences really rejected the Batman and Robin neon camp fest. Now, The Shadow wasn't the financial success it hoped to be, but it's really a fun adventure that, in hindsight, could have done with a sequel. Russell Mulcahy, the director behind Highlander, was getting his biggest shot with The Shadow, and he got Alec Baldwin, John Lowe, Ian McKellen, and Tim Curry, and nobody who was a fan of The Shadow could complain that Baldwin didn't look the part, as there was a terrible effort made with prosthetic makeup to make him look exactly like the cover of a dime novel. The movie's just fun, but interestingly, it also shares the basic origin plot for Batman Begins. The rich socialite leaves the city to find himself, is trained by mystical Asians to become a ninja, and then he comes back to the city to be its protector by donning an alternate identity that would strike fear in the hearts of criminals, and then some Asian villain shows up from his past to destroy his city. Like, that's pretty on point. Okay, so The Rocketeer, The Shadow, and The Phantom. I don't think many would argue with linking these three movies under one aesthetic or category. It makes sense, and if I were to add Dick Tracy to the list, I think most would follow me there. So here's where it starts to fall apart. Zorro. The Mask of Zorro. Comes out in 1998, and some of you are already starting to recoil. It doesn't have the 1930s Metropolis type setting that others do. It doesn't have any magic stuff or sci-fi tech, and I would agree, except Zorro is a legit pulp creation. And considering the close ties between Batman and Zorro, which I go into more in my graphic adaptation video on Zorro, it would be weird not to include it. Zorro is another 90s pulp nostalgia movie that was likely somewhat inspired by the success of Batman, which in 1998 now had 3 sequels out by that point. Okay, so we have Dick Tracy, The Rocketeer, The Shadow, The Phantom, and The Mask of Zorro. Now, I don't know about you, but if a list has Zorro on it in the 90s, much like the trinity of The Rocketeer, The Shadow, and The Phantom, I also think that there's a trinity of Zorro, Three Musketeers, and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Let's take them one at a time. None of these three take place in the 30s or the 40s, but Robin Hood is basically the same character as Zorro, just in another locale. They're both class warriors standing up for the poor against the aristocrats. Robin Hood inspired Zorro, like Zorro inspired Batman. Prince of Thieves is another 90s production. The Three Musketeers is at least a written work, and both are considered templates of the pulp swashbucklers and adventurers. And these three are of a piece, right? Like, they belong together. All for one and one for all, one might say. Seriously though, Prince of Thieves had Bryan Adams, everything I do it for you. And then the Three Musketeers has Bryan Adams and Rod Stewart and Sting all singing, I do it all for love, not for love, whatever the thing is there. And then we also have Zorro, which had Mark Anthony and Tina Arena singing, I wanna spend my lifetime loving you. And if we wanted to like track a pattern or tradition here, I would point out that Dick Tracy had 3 soundtracks. There was an instrumental version, a Sondheim soundtrack, and Madonna made an entire album called I'm Breathless around the 3 tracks that Sondheim wrote. Sondheim wrote. And not only that, but Prince did do the band dance in Batman. We can't forget that. Okay, now I know a bunch of people are already shaking their heads no already. These 3 don't fit in. It's the setting, right? So maybe if I correct the parameters and say 90s pulp noir nostalgia, then we can get rid of these more sword-slinging swashbucklers and get back to our city roots. But then I think we'd have to start including movies like Mulholland Falls in 1996 or LA Confidential in 1997, and while both are really good movies, they're more serious nods to the noir genre, and I don't think it fits with the spirit of the video that I'm trying to make. Robin Hood and the Three Musketeers fits better with the Phantom than they do with serious crime noir. And it's hard for me to cut out Zorro and Robin Hood when The Rocketeer was created in 1982 and was definitely not a pulp, and yet universally accepted on the list. So we're going for the pulp feel, right? Okay. But there's more. What about The Mummy in 1999? It's clearly inspired heavily by Indiana Jones, itself inspired by the pulps, or you could look at it as a reboot of a legit 1930s movie. It's set in the proper time, with the three Mummy movies being set between 1926 and 1946 for Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. We'd only include the first movie on this list because it's the only 90s production, but that all fits, right? Except that technically, The Mummy was never a pulp, and actually a horror monster. Now, I guess there were plenty of other mummy stories written in the pulps, and pulp stories could be horror, so I don't know. We include The Mummy on the list, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so now, if we accept The Rocketeer for being inspired by the pulps, and we accept Dick Tracy, despite it only being a comic, and if we accept Robin Hood for being the father of the pulps, then should we include Cutthroat Island? I mean, it's pulp-inspired for sure, it fits the vibe of the other movies, it matches the visuals of the swashbucklers. Even though it's not a remake of a pulp character, is it any less deserving than The Rocketeer? And if we look at our list, we have one movie each year, and we could slide Cutthroat Island into 1995 quite neatly, between The Shadow and The Phantom. Okay, now what about Hook? It's swashbuckling, it's adapting the works of J.M. Barrie, and it has pirates, but it's clearly not a pulp. Let's skip that one. We're already in the ruins of a proper, well-defined list. So if you wanted to include Hook, I wouldn't fight you on it. But there's something metatextual in Hook that elevates it or differentiates it from the others. It's not remaking Peter Pan. It's cleverly using Robin Williams as a surrogate for the viewer who gets to rediscover Peter Pan as a sequel. One more. What about Darkman? So clearly inspired by Batman, clearly influenced by the pulps and comics and all the various source materials these movies rely on, Sam Raimi, the director, and Liam Neeson's make a great original pulp hero. It's modern 90s, but it's still trench coats and fedoras. Darkman has a gross Freddy Krueger face from a chemical burn in an explosion, Swamp Thing style, but he also now has more physical strength and feels no pain, so he's hiding in the shadows with his face wrapped in bandages. Sam Raimi developed this movie when he was trying to get The Shadow made, so the connection to the pulps is fair. And also it's a trilogy. While Liam Neeson doesn't return to play Darkman in the sequels, The Mummy, Arnold Vosloo does. Okay. Last one for realsies. Batman. Now, I know it was 1989, but it played through into 1990 with how successful it was. But he is based on Zorro, based in a 1930s comic book with all the main hallmarks of the Shadow and the Phantom. It seems like he's right next to Dick Tracy and the Rocketeer in the pantheon of whatever these movies are. And Tim Burton definitely channeled a 1930s aesthetic when he designed Gotham. And honestly, since this has just become such a mess, let's just do a couple of honorable mentions. So these don't apply to this list because they weren't released in the 90s, but if I was watching through all these movies and into that vibe, I might also include Jake Speed from 1986. Jake Speed is quite literally a pulp hero that comes to life within the movie, kind of a proto-last action hero, if you will. Even the posters kind of look similar. It's not a lost classic or anything, but it's cheap fun, and if you've seen all these other movies I'm talking about and you're like, if only there was one more, try Jake Speed. And I would definitely include Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow from 2004 for sure. It's a 2000s green screen movie from the Sin City generation of green screen films. Big cast, based on no properties, but clearly drinking up the 1950s pulp sci-fi aesthetic and giving a high adventure with giant robots and 1940s diesel punk. I don't know if it's actually diesel punk, but it's definitely like a futuristic 1940s. Lots of fun. And then I would probably not include the 2011 Seth Rogen Green Hornet movie. It's not pulpy feeling, it's way off out of the 90s. It's more of a mess than this list that we just created today, but it's based on a 1930s pulp hero from radio and TV and then books and comics. I actually think that I've got a graphic adaptations video in me for Green Hornet in the future, so look out for that. So now you can see why I could never make this video before, how it just falls apart in my hands the further I go trying to construct something. But, I mean, I guess I kind of did make the video anyway, didn't I? So, how would you fix this list to make it work? Is it a lost cause? Should it be more broad and inclusive for longer form content? Or did I need to niche down further and limit the main three to The Rocketeer, The Shadow, and The Phantom? See, I like to include extra movies rather than just talk about the ones that everybody expects, so maybe I set my own trap. But isn't including the extras what makes the content have value? I don't know. Let me know in the comments, and I will see you next week. Will I see you next week? I hope I see you next week.
Xavier.